players can't just ask, can you just register me? Can you just... Oh my God.
Welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 21, part 1 of our series of YouTube videos focusing on how to become a level 1 judge. My name is Bryan Perlman, and I'm joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles Feather.
Hello, hello.
And the one and only Marco Sanchez.
Hello, everybody. So let's start off again, as always, by giving a shout out to our sponsor. This episode and series is sponsored by Judge Foundry. Judge Foundry is a membership-based nonprofit organization serving the US and Canada in providing certifications for tabletop gaming officials. They manage everything to do with obtaining and maintaining your certification and provide educational resources just like this one to ensure that every Judge Foundry certified judge has the knowledge and skills to be successful. When it comes to running Magic events at your local game store or at a larger international convention, Judge Foundry is a great resource for you to certify your skills. For more information on Judge Foundry, visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to find out how you can earn your level. You can also join the Judge Foundry Discord to chat and interact with the Judge Foundry judging community in the US and Canada. The link for both are in the description below.
In this episode and the next, we're going to discuss common tournament rules. These aren't necessarily how to run an event, but they are things that may come up during an event. Some may seem obvious, and others will seem less so. We won't cover every corner case in depth, but if you wish to go deeper or explore topics outside the scope of what is needed for the Level 1 exam, you can delve into our extensive library at JudgeCast.com or search for us on your podcast app of choice. Our podcasts are typically at least an hour, so you get both more detailed discussion, humor, insight, and of course, our availing palaver.
So let's start out with the roles of a tournament and who can play in them. The roles for a tournament are the tournament officials, that's the tournament organizer, the head judge, the floor judges, and the scorekeepers, and then the players and spectators. Every event has a tournament organizer, a head judge, and a scorekeeper, although they may be the same person. All right. By default, the tournament organizer is the head judge, but it's often a good idea to have those two roles separate. Okay. Additionally, the tournament rules do not technically require the head judge to be certified, but it's normally a bad idea to have an uncertified head judge. Hey, that's the whole point of this video series. And what's allowed and what's a good idea aren't always the same thing. So, the difference between the tournament organizer and the head judge: the tournament organizer is responsible for the space the event takes place in. They're responsible for providing the venue, sanctioning the event, hiring the staff, and providing event materials like printers and papers and pens for the players.
The head judge is responsible for the event. They adjudicate disputes, interpret rules, and make other official decisions. Head judges deal with appeals and do investigations for cheating. They have the authority to disqualify players, but their authority stops at the boundaries of the event. An illustration of the delineation between a head judge and a tournament organizer is that the head judge can disqualify a player from the event, but the TO can kick the player out of the play area entirely. Typically, the head judge and the tournament organizer work together, so they're using their authorities together. And it's not uncommon for a head judge to talk to a TO before disqualifying a player. In fact, it's kind of good practice to do so. And in recurring or healthy relationships, with a lot of trust, the line of responsibilities can get a little blurry. Scorekeepers are responsible for generating the correct pairings for each round and solving any issues with the tournament software. Now, this may be the same person as the head judge or the tournament organizer or a store employee. Tournament officials can play in regular rules enforcement level events. This is what allows a judge to play in Friday Night Magic while judging, but prevents an RCQ head judge from playing in the event. There are some other limited restrictions in the MTR, the Magic Tournament rules, but they are very uncommon.
Players do have some responsibilities as well. They are responsible for their behavior, both in the game and to other participants and officials. They are responsible for both knowing and following the rules of the game and calling attention to any rules or policy infractions they notice. Now, here's a weird player responsibility that may seem silly, but it answers a lot of questions that players will ask. Players are responsible for being physically present. That means you can't just sit there and say, hey, can you register me for the event and, I'll pick up my participation promo later. There's no situation where you can, sign them up for the event and then 2 hours later they come back and get the participation promo. They have to be there when it starts. Or, hey, I'm going to be 2 hours late. Can you just enroll me and tell my first round opponent I concede? There's no double queuing because you're registered in another event or you've got something else going on. Participation requires actual participation. Spectators are everyone that isn't a tournament official or a player. Players, when not actively playing, may be considered spectators in addition to their role of players. Spectators are responsible for being passive and silent. Players can request a judge to ask that spectators not observe their matches. This is typically done when spectators are not being passive and silent or are looming or crowding over players. Players tend not to like being surrounded. It makes them uncomfortable sometimes. Spectators, if they believe that they've observed an error, are allowed to ask the players to pause their play while they go to find a judge. Note, this rule changes at professional rules enforcement level. So if you are a spectator listening to this and you're ever in the aisle at a Pro Tour, well, read up on what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. It's a lot of not allowed to do. However, it is very important that the spectator not tell the player what the issue is. They need to tell the judge out of earshot of the players. This is particularly important as the spectator may reveal improper or disallowed information, or they may have it completely backwards and, confuse players and create a disruption. If a spectator actually does reveal improper or disallowed information, they are the one that is punished. They are registered in the event if they're not in the event, and they are given an infraction. We'll talk a bit more about this when we talk about tournament rules, about missed triggers.
Right. For tournaments, there are 3 rules enforcement levels. The event's rules enforcement level, or REL, is meant to communicate to all the participants, both staff and players, what the expectations are in terms of rules enforcement and procedures. Regular REL events are focused on the fun and the social aspects of the game. Players are expected to know a good chunk of the rules, but the focus is on education, sportsmanship over technically precise play. The policy document for regular REL events is called Judging at Regular, or the JAR, which will be discussed in a later episode.
Competitive rules enforcement level, or competitive REL events, are ones where there is a significant prize or invitations to some other competitive or professional tournaments. RCQs are typically the lowest level competitive REL event. Here we start to focus less on fun and start to hold players to higher standards of game rule knowledge. The professional REL is for tournaments with the largest awards or prestige. Here we hold the players and staff to the highest standards of behavior and technically correct play. Infractions of rules for both competitive and professional RELs are governed by the Magic Infraction Procedure Guide. The MIPG, often just referred to as the IPG, is a pretty long and dense document, and our podcast has covered many, many parts of it in excruciating detail over the years. L1s are not expected to know the IPG. In summary, the higher the prize, the higher the REL, the stricter the enforcement. While most parts of the MTR apply to all RELs, there are some sections of the MTR that have different rules depending on the REL.
Now let's move on to tournament mechanics. Matches are played until a player has 2 wins. We often say best of 3, but it really isn't. It's the first to 2 wins. So if the player keeps drawing somehow, they keep playing. The play draw rule is used to determine who goes first during Swiss rounds of an event. The players agree to a random method, most commonly a die roll, to determine who gets to decide if they play first or play second. You'll occasionally get players who cannot agree on a method. Just give them your best, I am not amused look. You know the one. Until they start to feel uncomfortable. And generally, they find an agreement shortly after. If a player has looked at their hand before they would decide to play first or second, they have chosen to play first, and that player will skip their draw on the first turn. After each game in a match, the loser of that game will decide if they want to play or draw in the next game. They may sideboard first. And if the previous game was a draw, the player that decided for the drawn game gets to decide again for the new one.
So there's several steps prior to starting the game. These are called the pre-game procedures. Pre-game procedures are done before the first game and between subsequent games. And while players cannot start playing before the judge announces the start of the round, they may complete the pre-game procedures. All right. So the pre-game procedure steps are, if sideboarding is allowed, do the sideboarding thing. All right. After sideboarding, you shuffle your deck. You can shuffle, reconsider sideboard options, change sideboard options, shuffle again. Okay. Then after that, you're going to present your deck to the opponent so they can shuffle. If you have a sideboard, you are also supposed to present the sideboard as well. Players don't, but you're supposed to. And at competitive rail, it solves a lot of problems if they do, but they're still not gonna. Step 4, if you have a companion, point it out. Companion. Companions are assumed to be in each game. So like after you announce your companion, it's assumed to be in each game until you explicitly state that the companion is no longer being used. Okay. Step 5. At this point, if you haven't decided who is going to go first via the play draw rule, you gotta do that now. Pop. All right. Step 6, draw your cards. Step 7, each player in turn order may take mulligans. If you take a mulligan, you shuffle again and repeat the presentation process. So you go back to step 2.
And just like starting a match, there are rules around leaving a match. The first and most important rule is players may not leave the table until the result of the match is recorded.
Say it one more time for the people in the back.
I was gonna.
Okay.
First and most important rule is players may not leave the table until the result of the match is recorded. Yes, seriously. If a match time limit is reached before a winner is determined, players will finish the current turn, also referred to as turn 0, and then play 5 additional turns. If no winner is determined at the end of the 5 turns, the game ends in a draw, and the match will be a draw as a result, typically. Once time is called, no new games should begin. So if players are shuffling up for game 3, when you call time in the round, they do not get to start that game. If the players had a time extension for some reason, their end of round does not begin until the time extension is used up. And the end of round rules can change if you are in a single elimination event. Now, those typically aren't very common, so just make sure to look up the rules beforehand if you find yourself working in one of those. Typically, you'll be able to check in with another judge who's helping you out on those types of events as well, and they'll be able to walk you through some of those too.
Prior to a match being recorded, players may concede or agree to an intentional draw. Players can concede at any time, because we really can't stop players from leaving if they have to go. Players can decide to intentionally draw a match. Intentional draws are supposed to be reported as 003. However, EventLink doesn't do this correctly, and the scorekeeper will need to fix the number of draws in the system. We will talk more about this when we get into bribery, but players may not agree to a concession or a draw in exchange for any incentive.
As a judge, you may need to take a call at a table, and it might take a little bit of time. If it takes more than a minute, the judge should give time equal to the length of the call to the nearest minute as a time extension. If the call is less than a minute, players are not entitled to a time extension. Sometimes a player may disagree or be unsure of a floor judge's ruling. In this case, they can appeal to the head judge. This is an opportunity to have the head judge hear the situation and provide a ruling. The right to an appeal is not a right to a second opinion. It's the right to have the head judge hear your situation. If the head judge happens to be the judge who took the call, there's no second opinion. Okay. However, if you are the head judge and the players seem uncertain with your ruling, it is correct to spend a few minutes to check yourself and ensure you are in fact correct.
Help prevent that wrecking of yourself.
Yes.
Got it. For some events, deck lists may be required. A deck list is a written record of the deck's original composition and sideboard. These are provided at the start of the tournament and cannot be altered. Typically, deck lists are not required for regular REL events, and only used for competitive and professional REL. However, the tournament organizer may require deck lists if they're running a regular REL event with an unusually large prize. A deck check is where a tournament official inspects the contents of a player's deck, usually comparing it to the deck list, so this typically happens at competitive or professional RELs, but it can occur even at regular REL events when there's a question about the legality of a player's deck, even if there is no deck list. Most commonly that's, did this player really sneak 4 rares from a different set into their pre-release pool?
Players are allowed to take written notes during a match and refer to those written notes during the match. Basically, when they start their match, they can't have any notes in front of them, but any notes they take during games can be referred to during any game of the match. Players do not have to reveal or explain their notes to the opponent. Players can also have some notes they wrote beforehand, typically what we call a sideboard guide. These cannot be accessed during games, only between matches. They do not have to reveal them to opponents, but they have to be put away before the next game. Also, these notes cannot be excessive. Now, I know that you'll know excessive when you see it, but just as a general guideline, it shouldn't be larger than a single page of paper front and back.
Also, we live in a world of cell phones. Digital notepads are everywhere. So Magic has to have a policy to allow for some electronic devices while preventing digital advice being sent to players. And this policy gets more strict as to what is and isn't allowed as we move up in the rules enforcement levels. At regular, players may use electronic devices. However, they cannot use them to access substantial strategic advice. Any electronic device used during a match, other than brief personal phone calls, must be visible to all players. That means if you keep your sideboard guide on your phone as a note, when you review it, it must be visible to both players when you review it. Okay? At competitive and professional RELs, these rules get even stricter.
Now let's get on to the rules around cards themselves. Players may use any authorized Magic game card from expansions, core sets, special printings, all depending on what is allowed by their format. Fake cards are not allowed at tournaments. Some players may find a legal but misprinted card that they want to use. This is fine. However, if the misprint can cause a non-trivial amount of confusion due to a different art or text on the card, the head judge can disallow the use of that particular card.
Now let's talk about proxies. And by talk about, I mean we're just going to briefly review this. The MTR definition of proxies and the player definition of proxies are completely different. What players call proxies are either playtest cards or counterfeits. If you Sharpie Craterhoof on an island, that's a playtest card. If you pay a special printing company for a pack of cards that you can't tell are fake when sleeved, that's a counterfeit. In tournament speak, proxies are not cards that players create. They are created at the direction of the head judge when a card has been accidentally damaged during the event, or if the card is a foil card for which there is no non-foil printing that exists. I just opened a Thanos Infinity Gauntlet. I want to play it in my draft deck, but I don't want to damage it, is not a reason to proxy a card. We don't proxy it when a card is just expensive. We proxy it when the card has been damaged during the course of the event.
Yeah, you wanna bend that Thanos Infinity Gauntlet in half accidentally as part of play? Okay, we'll proxy it then. Alters are also a section of the MTR that gets some discussion because what's allowed and what some players want to do with alters are in conflict with each other. So, artistic modifications are acceptable in events provided that the modifications do not: 1. Make the card art unrecognizable; 2. Contain substantial strategic information; 3. Contain offensive remarks or images; and 4. Do not cover up the mana cost or the name of the card. Okay? And the head judge is the final arbiter of what is and is not acceptable. Where things get problematic is when folks look at the weird secret lair treatments and say, my altar is less confusing than that. And as a judge, we want players to play their cool altars. However, we also want to protect every opponent that player may have from potentially confusing altars. We can't allow every altar. We don't want to disallow every altar. So those are the two extremes. Allow everything, disallow everything. Okay. So since we don't want to do either one of those, there are rules that allow some altars as long as they don't cross a line. Players can't cross the line. WotC, fortunately, may decide to cross that line, and it should be seen as an unfortunate situation that we have to allow because it's their game instead of just throwing everything out the window.
On a completely different topic, players can use small items like glass beads as markers and place them on top of their library as a reminder for in-game effects. It's a good idea. Suggest players use them to remind them of their upkeep triggers or day and night changes, or, my personal favorite of course, a reminder to pay for your pacts.
Now let's talk a little bit about shuffling. At the start of every game, you must randomize your library. You aren't really randomizing it in the mathematical sense, but you are putting the deck in a state where no player can know the order of the cards. When done shuffling, the deck must be presented to the opponent. The opponent may then shuffle additionally. If a player sees the face of some of the cards while shuffling, oh well, that deck is no longer shuffled. You need to start over and randomize it appropriately.
All right, so one thing that might come up is pile shuffling. This is a process where players may divide their cards into equal piles. This is not a true shuffle, okay? This is because if the order of the cards were known at the start of a pile shuffle, then they can be known at the end of a pile shuffle. So because pile shuffles don't actually contribute to the randomization of the deck, they aren't allowed. Well, you are allowed to do it once each game to allow for counting the cards in your deck. Typically, this is done before you present so that you know that you're presenting a 60 card deck, a 40 card deck, a 100 card deck to the opponent. But it's not a shuffle, it's a count. Don't treat it like a shuffle.
Also, a thing that comes up occasionally at the LGS typically is the concept of mana weaving. Mana weaving is where players stick lands between spells to try and spread the mana out and avoid any kind of clumping. They may see it as harmless and benign, but you are literally stacking your deck. You are making sure that you get the right mix of lands and spells to have a better game. Well, a player might respond, well, I shuffle afterwards, Judge. But if you shuffle well enough to undo the mana weaving, then mana weaving itself is pointless. If they insist that they get better draws after they mana weave, well, then they aren't shuffling well enough to undo the mana weaving, in which case, well, there's your problem.
The last topic we're going to talk about here is sleeves and marked cards. Players are responsible for making sure that none of their cards are marked, and during play, an unprotected card will get nicks and dings and become marked. So players will often use sleeves to protect their cards. The sleeves can also become marked. A sleeve or card is considered marked if it has something about it that makes it possible to identify the card without seeing its face. Common instances of marked sleeves include A dinged sleeve corner. A flat edge on a sideboard card in a deck where all the other cards have that wavy top that old sleeves get, when they've been used a bunch of times. Slightly transparent sleeves that you can see double-faced cards through. Common colors that you have to check for that are orange, pink, white, and yellow sleeves. A bend in the card. Foils are not inherently marked, but they do bend more easily. A judge may disallow card sleeves they believe are marked, and the head judge is the final authority on if a card is marked. Judges can also disallow sleeves based on the artwork on the back. Players should think carefully before buying anime girls sleeves. And speaking of anime girls...
Oh, wow, what a segue. Once again, we'd like to thank Judge Foundry for their support in sponsoring this series and helping you earn your Level 1 certification. Make sure to visit judgefoundry.org and click on the orange Become a Judge button to learn how you can join the magic judging community in the US and Canada and earn your certification with Judge Foundry.
Join us next time as we continue our series for earning your Level 1 certification and talk more about tournament rules. And if you want to reach out to us, we have our own Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. The invite link to our Discord server is in the description below, as well as our JudgeCast and individual social media links. If you're a fan of our content, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel and ring that bell to be notified of when new videos in this series are posted or when a new episode of our full podcast is released. Make sure to check out our channel's playlists for a complete L1 series, as well as a Learn to Judge playlist with episodes from JudgeCast's history focused on helping you become a better judge. And as always, you can find everything relating to JudgeCast at judgecast.com. With that, I'm Charles Featherer, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
I'm Bryan Perlman, and all my proxies are made from revised planes.